This is Greg Troutline with Maritime Reporter TV, and we're very pleased to be joined today by Troy Demmer, the co-founder and head of products, Gecko Robotics, to discuss this innovative company and the opportunities that it sees today in the U.S. Navy market. Troy, to start us off, can you give an overview of Gecko Robotics today?
Gecko is a company that started over 10 years ago now. We operate, in a wide range of geographies. We actually have, locations in Boston, New York, Washington, D.C., Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I'm out of, Houston, Texas, and Abu Dhabi as well. And so that really allows us to cover, most of the globe from those operating locations, and we plan to bring on more. Some of the other kind of by the numbers metrics. 200 engineers in the company, representing over half of our FTEs. We've acquired somewhere around, at this point, hundreds of thousands of pieces of critical infrastructure. And what that means, is we actually have deployed a technology that we've developed. It's a robotics plus AI solution that helps us to understand the health of the built world. And so that device comes in different forms and shapes. We might get into it throughout this call, but you can think of a robot that is wall climbing, flying, or submersible, and it gets into some of the most dull, dirty, dangerous environments to gather critical health data that then enables our customers to figure out, this is the condition of my asset, this is how I should manage this asset over the next decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. So it allows for specific targeted plans to be made. So we take all that data and turn it into software workflows for the customer to then help them to make critical repair decisions, allocate CapEx dollars across, a fleet or across a, enterprise, and really get control of their physical infrastructure. So we basically turn the atoms into bits that then make that information consumable, digestible across many layers of the enterprise.
Can you kind of take me back to the beginning of Gecko Robotics? Specifically, how was it founded, and what specifically are you responsible for today?
Yeah, Gecko was a product of a real problem. So we developed the solution, and its earliest inception was in 2013, actually coming out of Grove City College, where I met Jake Lucerian, who's my partner and co-founder here at Gecko. And it started in the power generation space. It was actually an alumni of the school that had a merchant power plant manager, chronic challenges that we've now learned to become commonplace. But his challenge was, I don't have predictability in terms of if my asset's going to be running tomorrow. And so what would happen is forced failures would cause this facility to come down. These outages are very costly, not just in terms of collateral damage, but in terms of the opportunity cost of not being able to operate and be called upon. In this case, he's making electrons that go to the grid. Now actually makes electrons to power crypto rigs to mine Bitcoin. So we've seen his business model evolve over the decade since we started with him. But we really got access to a problem that needed a solution, and that solution became we need a fundamental understanding of the materials. We're a sensor company, a robotics company, and an AI company, and it's that end-to-end stack that actually enables us to not just acquire the data that previously didn't exist, because this individual relied on a human on a rope with a single point measurement tool, getting less than 0.1% coverage of the asset. A lot of times having to forego that activity altogether because you couldn't get access, you didn't have time, you couldn't put up the scaffolding to get that person to that point of needing to get that data. So it really starts fundamentally, first principally, we started a company to generate data that didn't exist. And then we take that data and turn it into insights, enterprise insights that allow customers to gain control over things like $1 billion CapEx spends, and similar sums that today are lost to these unpredictable failures that we are making predictable, in the sense of how to get ahead of those.
So earlier this year, Gecko Robotics announced its participation in the U.S. Navy Columbia-class submarine program. Can you discuss in detail this contract specifically?
We started serving the Navy on the sustainment side, so specifically surface ships. And that gave us insights in terms of, okay, how do we get this information earlier and earlier in the cycle, right? Instead of a ship that's been in service for 20, 30 years, trying to assess the health of it and, how do we manage the life cycle and something like an avail plan, very costly to maintain these ships. About 2/3 of the spend, the DoD spends is actually in maintaining the assets and infrastructure they build, and only about 1/3 is on the upfront procurement side. But that led us to the procurement side, to the sort of initial, construction and commissioning of our most strategic assets, the assets that give us an asymmetrical advantage in, force protection. And so, as you mentioned, Columbia class is our, is the gem there for our entire DoD, and is looking to replace the Ohio class. And so what we've done for them is we've actually worked in various points in the supply chain where there are bottlenecks around understanding the quality assurance, things that, as part of our manufacturing and supply chain, 5,000 suppliers, there's vulnerabilities in that supply chain. There's places where, we are maybe, not as efficient as we'd like to be, or the process of manufacturing is just very complex. 10,000-ton presses forging a component that becomes part of a nuclear propulsion system, right? These are very, complicated manufacturing and machining processes. So we give that quality assurance along the way to give them the auditability and the assurance to know that the equipment that's being produced is going to meet the specs of the military. And so we've adopted the technologies that we've brought to bear on the commercial side to be able to go assess things like welds, castings, and forgings. Again, all components that one day, become part of the, prime shipbuilding, final part of a Columbia sub. That work's expanded, but very, very quickly. Across the Navy, we are, growing at 400% year on year. Well into the millions of dollars of production revenue. I can't give specifics in terms of that number, but it's a very quickly growing line of effort, and most importantly, it's a very important mission that we're helping to serve, which is to keep the ships to get more ships into capacity and keep those ships in the fight.
So, but when you look at the U.S. Navy holistically, what do you see as that big opportunity for Gecko Robotics?
Yeah, so this is probably yourself and much of the audience probably have seen these headlines before, but just to state some of them, China's shipbuilding capacity is 230 times ours. We currently have about 40% of our ships right now not available because they're in maintenance backlog or in a current maintenance cycle. We have a stated goal as a Navy by 2040 to get to 381 ships. Today we're at 298. And that number is not exactly growing because next year, although we have planned 6 new builds to come online, approximately one, per class per ship class, roughly speaking, we are decommissioning 19. That leaves us a deficit of 13. So the number's shrinking. But we have the stated goal of 381. So what Gecko is doing about this is we're actually working across the supply chain and across the life cycle of these assets. So it's really a 3-pronged strategy that we see, which is to help, build more quickly, with the highest quality assurance we can, to increase our capacity. Secondly, and more importantly, really, is to sustain the ships we have today, to extend the life cycle of the ships. How do we inverse that ratio from 19 decommissions to 6 new builds, to extend the life of them, again, sort of through this program where we can assess the condition of them and stay on top of things that, otherwise would call them out of the fleet, no longer make them fit for service. And so, by improving the turnaround cycles and extending the life of these of the existing fleet of 298, we can help to increase that availability number, again decreasing that 40% of downtime that they're in a maintenance backlog, and keep more ships in the fight. And then the third thing is we're really looking around and saying, like, how else do we surge on this capacity? Where else can we potentially be creative around getting new ships and getting ships that maybe currently aren't on the radar back into the fight. And you can see sort of the cross commercial applications, ships and reserves, places that you can go to help bolster that number to get to the 381.
Obviously the U.S. Navy is one highly visible example, but can you discuss where else in the maritime world, naval or commercial, Gecko robotic solutions are being used today?
Yeah, so we had talked a little bit about this, but we do a lot of work in the oil and gas sector. A lot of that started sort of on the refining side, kind of above the well, downstream of the well. But we also have gotten into a lot of offshore work as well. So we're working on with the major oil majors across their offstream portfolio. So this gets us into many similar use cases and applications that you would see in the commercial maritime space when you think of transportation and logistics, enter fleets of maritime vessels. So that's one area we can point to. There's a lot of publicly available information on that. We also have a lot of discussions with allied navies and other commercial applications, but nothing that we're able to announce just yet.
So can you discuss how Gecko Robotics is investing today, how much and where you invest your R&D funds, and what tangible developments can the maritime community expect to see from your company in the coming year?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's the thing that we think, is a real differentiator and fair advantage of ours. Again, I kind of go back to that first principled approach. We didn't have a solution when we started in 2023, nor did we try to create a solution in search of a problem. Gecko's been really accomplished at doing a motion called forward deployed engineering. And what that means is we are able to look at an end outcome that we want to achieve, some capability gap that exists today. And we can fill that very quickly because we've got a modular tech stack across hardware, robotics and software data pipelines, and then the workflows where, AI analyzes all that data and, allows the end user to take actionability on the data. So we have a lot of modular components of our technology stack, and it enables us to spin up solutions with a lot of, with very rapid cycles, very rapid ability to bring new technologies to market. And we're the type of company that, does all, sort of at risk, firm fixed kind of approach. And so unlike many of the traditional players in the space, whether they be the, service providers or, the folks that have legacy, legacy capabilities, we are not beholden by the same sort of financial measures or public markets that evaluate these maybe cost plus or more risk adverse business models. And so we can invest ahead of the curve and bring technologies to bear very quickly, especially for the government sector. And that's what we continue to do. And so we spend over half of our resources on R&D, to making this transition from a world of platforms and large equipment that kind of came out of the Ford era, in the Industrial Revolution, to this digital age, an age that is represented by, software workflows and data advantages. And so that's where Gecko is investing very heavily, is, on the leveraging of the data that exists and the creation of net new data to serve, the largest enterprise outcomes we can.